Last evening, EU Commissioner Wren bluntly told you, despite all the government's leaks and spins, that Ireland must pay the €3.1 billion promissory note in 2 weeks' time. And he arrogantly claimed that respecting commitments and obligations is a key tradition in the EU law. Since when, Taoiseach? This law was never applied to France or Germany when year after year they both regularly breached their stability and growth rules. But to differ on, Taoiseach, French and German leaders stand up for themselves and their people, just as the Spanish PM did. Agus seachas sa bheith ag seasamh leis an dictadh in Brussels, tá sé ar dúlgas agat seasamh leis our bubble. You won't do this, Taoiseach. You acquiesce at every turn and you expect Irish citizens to pay for your folly. You're very, very clear about this. Stealth taxes, cuts, spot increases, septic tank charges, the household charge. You insist that Irish people must pay for the greed of bankers and developers, no matter about the social consequences. €3.1 billion, which you will pay at the end of this month, is the equivalent of 19 years' worth of household charges. €3.1 billion, which could create jobs and stop our young people from emigrating. This works out, Taoiseach, at approximately €688 for every single man, woman and child in this state this year. So, Taoiseach, we cannot afford it. Why don't you start a real negotiation? If you don't ask, you won't get. Tell the ECB now that you will not and cannot pay this €3.1 billion.
Near universal, positive, though as I said, qualified reception to the principle of a single working age payment. This is not a payment that people are fundamentally opposed to. They welcome it, but the qualification on it is that this must be preceded. Any move in this direction must be preceded by putting into place the supports and ensuring that there were jobs. So that's one of the key points. Is the key observation that there wasn't enough jobs, and this is
well, we're definitely delighted to see the report today, very supportive of the recommendation that single working age payment, while it's a great idea in principle and could be introduced sometime in the future, but we'd like to see the supports and services in place first. So we're talking about things like childcare and after school care, we're talking about things that reflect the cost of disability, and we're talking about the right education and training programs that will get people into good quality jobs that's going to lift their families out of poverty. So we're very supportive of the report. I think we'd love the Minister to take the recommendations on board and to really consider a lot of the findings, a lot of the work. It's, a range of organisations with the same position, and if she could just take that on board and, work with us. We want this to happen, but we just don't need it to happen now, not until the right things are in place.
Well, we covered a number of issues. Primarily we covered the issue of the continued imprisonment of MARIAN and her physical and mental condition, and we also covered the issue of strip searching and the ongoing protest at Row House in McGabry.
And what sort of a response did you get from the Justice Minister?
Well, we said to the Justice Minister very clearly that Marian Price has already spent 300 days in isolation in McGabry prison. She's been moved to Highbank, which is totally inadequate in terms of dealing with her mental and physical health condition at the moment. And we have said to him that it's important that he acts immediately to ensure that this woman is given the medical treatment that she needs and not within a prison environment.
Well, the programme for government has over 80 targets, I think 83 targets in it. The primary focus of it is continuing to be about growing the economy, and that means there has to be specific measures, particularly in these difficult economic times, in terms of job creation, target and investment, and I see it has tried to strike a balance between attracting inward investment, targeting support for Indigenous businesses and targeting a job creation strategy, and that's all hugely important to try and offset the economic difficulties that we face. There are also specific measures for tackling poverty and social exclusion, and I want to see those well supported. Sinn Féin has argued for that. This is a compromise document between the parties in the executive. It's not our own particular programme for government, but nonetheless I think there are a lot of good pointers in it that will try and focus support for where it's needed to try and create jobs, to try and support those who are most marginalised, to try and just find ways, and I think the Executive need to continue to commit themselves to find ways to offset the benefits attack on welfare system that's coming from the Tory government in Westminster. So there's a lot of work to be done over the next 4 years. We're still going to be in a difficult economic position according to all the indicators right throughout that period, and so the Executive needs to target its resources where they can have most effect in supporting local people to find jobs and offset the impacts of the economic downturn.
What is your reaction then to the statement by the Prime Minister's yesterday?
Well, I think it was a wasted opportunity, and I think the Taoiseach missed the opportunity. Obviously, there were positive elements to the visit and to the agreement, but I'm particularly concerned with the failure of the Taoiseach to get any movement whatsoever from the British on breaches of the Weston Park Agreement, which is an intergovernmental agreement. I'm concerned, despite numerous commitments, that no progress has been made on the British refusing to be part of the investigations into the Dublin Monaghan bombings. And there are other issues, the Bill of Rights, Act na Gaeilge, and so on, which are all matters which need to be resolved, and only the British can do it.
But do you not think, though, that this kind of commitment to strengthen their ties, that perhaps the Taoiseach might be able to build on those issues, you know, using yesterday's meeting as a foundation stone for sort of strengthening the relationship between the two nations?
Well, I think that the ties are quite strong, and we're in an entirely new relationship, but I think it needs rebalanced, and that relationship needs continuously worked on. I mean, yesterday was essentially a photo call. The Finucane family were in expectation that the British were going to give them the public inquiry, which they signed up to do at Weston Park. They haven't done that. Yet both the Taoiseach and the British Prime Minister can sign up their commitment to all of these agreements, while one party, the British, are in direct breach of one of those agreements.
Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform last November made a commitment to end the practice of awarding special severance payments and additional years to city and county managers. I think we all know that at a time when the state is on its knees and insolvent, that the kinds of pensions that we've seen awarded to some are simply not justifiable and not affordable. Since making his initial statement, the Minister hasn't done anything to, in fact, end the practice of awarding these lump sum payments and additional years. So we have attempted to assist him in his task by introducing legislation today which does precisely that. We're calling on the Minister and the Government to support this legislation and to make sure that we do not have scenarios such as we saw with a retiring Limerick City manager last month. He retired at 58 on a pension of over 73,000 euros per annum, with a lump sum payment of 202,551 euro and a special severance gratuity payment of 91,000. I think those figures speak for themselves. That's clearly not sustainable, not justifiable. The government have made the commitment to end this practice and we want them to do just that.
Now that the sheep have calmed down, Minister, in light of the High Court ruling yesterday, coupled with the overwhelming number of people, including myself, who have chosen not to register and pay this unjust tax, is it now time for this government to scrap the household tax altogether?
Minister, this is a charge that will go towards the provision of local services. It is necessary, and any elected,
please, deputies,
any elected member of this House, I believe, has a duty to uphold the laws of this land. And I believe that incitement to people not to pay the charges, who themselves will end up, as was the case before with the bin charges, innocent citizens ended up in the courts because they have been incited not to comply with the law. It is a fair charge as far as we're concerned, and it is also necessary because of the state of the National League.
There are very few people listening to this debate this morning who believe what you're saying. And despite what you may think, people are not stupid. Funding to local authorities have been cut already by this government. And this is an issue of fairness. And you said that this tax was fair. And that is contrary to what the Taoiseach has said and to what your own party leader has said, who have both said that this is an unfair tax. Now, given that it's an unfair tax, and you talk about people having a responsibility as legislators to uphold the law, people elected me to legislate, to legislate just and fair laws. And this tax is neither just nor fair, and that is the reason why I will not be paying it.
That this is an issue that must be resolved satisfactorily for the women victims involved and at the earliest opportunity. And I look forward working with the all-party group and with my colleagues in Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams, Sandra McLennan, both of whom are very active on the all-party group with me, working towards the realisation of the demands of the victims of symphysiotomy, that we have a full, open, transparent public inquiry, and that we see the suspension of the statute of limitations in order to allow the remaining number, and sadly an ever depreciating number, of women now of a particularly advancing in age profile, that they will get the chance to receive some level of compensation commensurate with the terrible experience they've had and the pain, suffering and anguish they've had to cope with throughout all of their adult lives.
Because it was a horrible experience, and I mean, for anyone to physically restrain you and then push you as I was, I mean, it was really horrible. And like I told them last night at the interview, there's days I'd wake up and all I think about is rape, gang rape. You know, to be lying like that, physically restrained by two nurses and doctors, and then he sat and saw you apart. Horrible, horrible. So it makes me very sad.